As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more.
And the headline here, Korean gaming giant Nexon buys $400 million stake in Avengers Directors Entertainment Company. So this is Nexon, which is South Korean gaming giant. They bought a 38% stake in entertainment company AGBO. AGBO was founded by brothers Joe and Anthony Russo, who directed Avengers Endgame, and they valued AGBO at $1.1 billion. In 2020, AGBO produced Extraction. I have not seen it, but it's supposedly one of the most watched original Netflix films. And the quote here from Nexon says, "Film and television have been proven to drive higher engagement and longevity for game franchises, and we are now partnered with the best creators and adapters of franchise IP in film and television." $400 million stake, Nexon buying into fundamentally an entertainment company. I want to get your guys' general thoughts, obviously, in your minute, but also specifically as it relates to the conversation we had around Take-Two buying Zynga, and the comment I made on IP being maybe the most valuable. To me, this felt like a way better buy, but I'm curious what you guys think. Jimmy, start with you.
Immediately, that comment that you had about IP is where my mind went. Extraction's a pretty good film on Netflix if you haven't seen it. Chris Pine, I think, the one that played Thor, and an Indian boy and some drug lord dispute in India and Bangladesh. Really entertaining watch. But to me, what it really says is you have a gaming company here hiring two brilliant minds that are known for putting out big blockbuster type films. Always a tough line to cross, right? Because we've seen it done poorly. We've seen it done really, really well. And this is not just a small investment, right? What do you say, 38%? Massive. Yeah. I'm gonna appreciate the risk, and I'm also gonna appreciate that they're going big on it. And I'm a fan of both of those films. And if you approach it as, hey, we want your minds because you come up with great storytelling and we can incorporate that into a game, as opposed to them saying, oh, they're going to create the Extraction video game, I'd probably be less bullish on it. So I think this is pretty cool. We need to have like a yes or no thing going on here, but I'm going to say
I think we're going to do that next week. Lindsay, go ahead.
This is too bold for me. I think that there's been a flood of recent gaming media content. Like we have Last of Us and Uncharted coming out. There was just Arcane, which it's all been successful to its credit, but we're getting to a point where there's a lot of it. And I don't know that any of them, other than Arcane, like there's been a lot of, I mean, we all know a billion gaming movies that have also failed. So I don't know that I am super confident that this is like a smash hit, knock it out of the park. But like Jimmy said, I do appreciate the risk. And if you have the money and you're going to take the risk, you might as well go after one of the best studios and really go for it. So it's a little bold for me, but I certainly hope it works out for them.
Jeff?
This is the Russo brothers, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. These guys literally invented the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like whatever project they do is going to work. It's going to get bought by some, Netflix or whoever, even if it's not very good. It's probably going to make money. So I always think about like, would you not, if it was your own personal money, like you wouldn't invest in this? I mean, I would be putting as much as I could into this project if I had the opportunity to do so. I think when you bet behind creatives like this, like you're bound to win in this world, just because I think you can win even if the project itself loses. Like I don't necessarily think whatever content they create has to even be that good for this actual company to make money and you to make money on your investment. And I would just note, this isn't the first time Nexon's done something like this. I had remembered that this was something they'd done in the past, so I Googled it quickly, and they actually have a history. Like last year in March, they invested $1.5 billion in Hasbro, Bandai Namco, Konami, and Sega. And basically, it's just they have a bunch of free cash flow and money laying around, and they like to invest it kind of in companies with strong global IP that they think are undervalued. To me, that's a little bit more odd. Like, I would rather, if I were an investor in Nexon, I'd rather them return that money to shareholders or reinvest it in the business. But in terms of them investing here in a private round with the Russo brothers, like this is a home run to me, I think.
I agree. I really like this. And I think, to your point, it only needs a couple of 1 or 2 hits here, not even hits. And the valuation seems very, very reasonable in a world, where movies and games can easily generate billions of dollars. And with Nexon behind it and, the Russo brothers and this kind of power behind them, I really like this. But you mentioned Sega, Jeff. So this is the next one I'm going to bring up. It's Sega in the news. And the headline here is Sega cites fan backlash in surprisingly cautious take on gaming NFTs. It says, if it is perceived as simple money making, Sega would like not to proceed. So, after the reaction, if you remember, to Ubisoft's kind of, NFT integration into their games, Sega has taken a more cautious approach. They've cited negative elements in quotes. They've said they need to carefully assess what will be accepted and what will not be by the users. They also said they would like to try out various experiments, and they've already started many different studies and considerations in the space, including so-called play-to-earn games. We talked at length about play-to-earn. Is Sega here taking the right approach, or will history say that they were too cautious? Jeff, start with you.
I think they're taking the right approach. I mean, we've seen this negative backlash a number of times. And if you're interested in this kind of topic, I mean, this is another plug for Meta Business. I mean, this is what we talk about for the most part on that podcast. So please check that out. I think we've discussed this on a couple of those podcasts. I'm starting to think, that there's sort of 2 separate communities, and you have gamers and then kind of crypto enthusiasts. And the early adopters of these new blockchain and Web3 games are going to be the crypto enthusiasts and not necessarily the hardcore gamers that are fans of Sega and played Sonic, 40 years ago. So I do think that they're probably smart to dip their toe in, and some of these bigger AAA studios are going to have to either acquire teams and IP and content that resonates with this other group of kind of crypto enthusiasts, or maybe create different brands, like doing it in their existing games, like a Sonic, a blockchain Web3 version of Sonic is going to tank, and the community is going to hate it. So, yeah.
Lindsay, your thoughts on Sega's tepid approach here?
I don't think that taking a measured approach to such an amorphous space is necessarily a bad thing. They're indicating that they're going to put feelers out and try different things and see what works best for their community. I don't know why there would be such a backlash to that kind of thing.
Jimmy, does Sega just care more about their gamers than Ubisoft does?
They care too much about their gamers. This is a very vocal, loud minority, and gamers make us think about a lot of things. I think if I'm a business, then I should do what makes my business money, right? I mean, I think what the joke here is that Sega is trying to say that they're not going to do something inauthentic, which is another word that we hear often. But Sega, there's a lot of money in NFTs right now. There's a lot of hype and FOMO and all these things. We've seen Louis Vuitton and Burberry do it pretty well and kind of interesting with those mobile games. And so Sega's has some really cool IP. The Sonic movie, the second one's coming out this year. So they're kind of on a relative hot streak. And I mean, relative to them, why, I didn't care for that comment, because just do what you think is going to appease your audience and generate, I don't know, profit for your business. Why would you listen to like the one guy that's yelling, "This sucks"?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're right. It could be a very, very vocal, very small minority. It's a good point. And maybe they're making a mistake as a consequence. But, I don't think anyone long term, there's still so much opportunity. I don't know if anyone will fault them for taking a more measured approach. They may not win as big, right, if this pans out to be the next big thing. But the cautious approach doesn't seem like a terrible idea. Guys, one last one here, and I love this one because it's another, prophet was right moment. And this is, Phil Spencer, I feel like, has been on a tear with some of his commentary around gaming. Obviously, he's the head of Xbox at Microsoft. And here he says, the headline is, Netflix is moving into games in a very smart way, Phil Spencer says. So I'll just read the first sentence. It says, Phil Spencer thinks Netflix is smart for leveraging its successful streaming business and jumping into video games. He says, I think it's smart what Netflix is doing. They're buying some studios. They're learning about the creative process of interactive entertainment. And I think it's a very smart way for them to move into the space. He says, Xbox has taken a page from Netflix's book with Xbox Game Pass. And he says, from a streaming standpoint, Xbox Game Pass, which has long been popularly called the Netflix for games, something Spencer doesn't disagree with. He says, from a streaming standpoint, it is, in other words, the Netflix for games. I'd say the difference for us is in the business model of you can buy every game that's available on the subscription, which is a little different than a music subscription or a movie subscription. Spencer says the transactions business is still Xbox's biggest business and bigger than subscriptions, though he says subscriptions are growing faster. So I'm curious what you guys think of Phil Spencer's evaluation of Netflix's approach to gaming. I know we had a long conversation on a previous live stream about, did we think Netflix was being too careful, not jumping in big enough, not doing things big enough? Phil Spencer seems to think this, again, more measured approach, maybe that's the theme of these last two stories, is the right one. Jeff, what do you make of Phil's commentary here, given that in some ways Netflix could become a competitor to Xbox Game Pass?
Well, you sort of stole my thunder a little bit. I won't get into too much about my thoughts on Netflix because we have covered that a lot in the past. I was on the opposite side of you, the prophet, so I am in the position of disagreeing here with Phil Spencer. I don't think Netflix has done enough to make a big splash. Having said that, I am not surprised that Phil Spencer is saying this, given that Netflix could potentially become a big competitor if, say, they went out and bought an Activision Blizzard or, a Sony or something like that. So Phil Spencer's kind of praising them for not coming and competing with him. So yeah, I think I generally agree with Phil Spencer. I think he's obviously very well respected in the industry. I don't necessarily agree with him on this take. Netflix going in big would have been a riskier move, but I think ultimately if they want to do anything really meaningful that impacts their actual business in game, their overall enterprise value, what they're doing now is not going to make a difference. It's kind of mice nuts. So they need to make a bigger move.
Lindsay, where are you on the Phil Spencer view on Netflix here?
Well, he clearly listened to our live stream when I said that I thought it was great that Netflix released those games and could collect a bunch of data on the game industry and the users and try to figure out how they could make a big splash. So obviously he's listening to me, which I very much appreciate. Phil,
we'll send him an invoice for Lindsay's consulting time.
Yeah, the invoice, it will be sent to you. Please respond accordingly. Thank you.
Jimmy?
Well, what I thought was clever about this was, seemingly an article about Netflix, but it just kind of goes on to praise a lot of Microsoft's products and approaches to things. So, I don't really have much more to say, I don't think, besides Jeff and Lindsay, other than we've talked about Netflix at length. I think they're different target audiences. And I just thought it was a funny way for him to be like, oh, yeah, they're doing it right. And by the way, here's everything that Microsoft does and why it's, why we're different and why we're killing it too.
Look, I obviously, it's nice to see him praise what is a would-be competitor. I think he's always been well respected because he speaks, his mind. And I think he's just very insightful in terms of the gaming industry in general, obviously, given how long he's been in it and what he's built. But you want my tinfoil hat theory that we may see Phil Spencer going to run Netflix's gaming and build Netflix's gaming business. Just a tinfoil hat theory, but it's not impossible, right? It's not
mark it down. Mark this down. We're good.
I think if he goes anywhere, he goes to Activision. I think he's one of the few guys that can credibly take over for Bobby and actually be an improvement. Potentially.
That's a good. Assuming Bobby
challenge.
Leaves or gets pushed.
Yeah, if we assume,
out.
Yes.
And the challenge of a sinking ship might be an interesting one for him, right? So you're right, that may be a very attractive move. But Netflix also has deep pockets, could attract a guy like Phil if they really get serious about gaming. So that's an interesting one to watch.